promised, we are back. And so this video was inspired by popular demand in the comments, where in a previous video, I said that my P doom is about 30%. And so everyone said, well, then that means your P not doom is 70%. So we need that video. So here we are, because that was actually a really interesting thought experiment. So before we dive in, I just wanted to share a little bit of data. So to kind of calibrate where the audience is at, I ran this poll yesterday, and it seems like the audience, the wisdom of the masses, the aggregate data is pretty similar to where I'm at. So the P doom of my audience overall, if this statistically worked out, is about 22%. The P meh of neutral outcome is 23%, which we didn't really define these. And then P win of generally good outcome is 55%. So you divide that P meh up, and we're pretty much in the middle of the distribution. So we're all pretty aligned here, because my statistics align pretty well with the aggregate statistics of my audience. So without further ado, let's get into the why my P win is so high. So first, just at a high level, 70% chance that we're going to end up in a good state. Now, one thing that some people have asked is why I don't have a more nuanced approach. And the reason is because last year when I first started running these polls, I have a hair in my mouth. The tragedies of owning pets. So anyways, so last year I ran some polls, and I was trying to figure out what is everyone's P doom, and a lot of people pointed out that it's a very high risk situation, and that it's kind of a bimodal outcome where it'll be either really good or really bad, and not a whole lot in between. Now, obviously, not everyone believes that. A lot of people believe, again, 23% of you out there believe that we're going to be somewhere in the middle. So I don't want to invalidate that position, but at the same time, I think there is a pretty strong argument to be made that we're going to create some kind of attractor state, and that attractor state will either be really good or really bad, and that there will be kind of a bimodal or a kind of a fork in the woods kind of outcome. Now, again, that's a little bit hyperbolic. Who knows if that is how it's going to play out? Not a fortune teller. But at the same time, I am still pretty optimistic, and it seems like most of you guys are too. So let's dive into why we can be so optimistic. Now, first and foremost is open source. Open source is on the rise, and open source is only at best a few months behind closed source. I ran a poll a few weeks ago where the lead that people think that OpenAI has closed to about 3 to 6 months. And I would tend to agree with that. Some people think that OpenAI still has a bigger lead than that. It doesn't really seem like it. When you consider where we were 6 months ago or 12 months ago, we're in a different world. So in the grand scheme of things, open source, closed source, all the new competitors entering the field, yes, OpenAI is still ahead-ish. But if you saw in the news, Claude 3 Opus, their big one, has actually surpassed ChatGPT. And I and many people that I talk to, we have basically stopped using ChatGPT in favor of other tools. Now, that being said, OpenAI does tend to leapfrog the competition, where they're very quiet and then they release something that just really changes the game. Sora being the most recent example. But again, they're probably going to be surpassed relatively quickly, or caught up to at least. But anyways, my point here, though, is that open source is demonstrably, I'm not going to say superior, not in terms of technical qualities, but from a safety perspective, there is a very powerful argument to be made that open source is superior because, again, if you are a small, pen testing or red teaming lab or whatever, you don't have the money to be able to train up a big model just to pick it apart. But if more shops like, Elon Musk and Meta and others release their models open source, then we can pick them apart and look at them not just from a safety perspective, but from an alignment perspective. And that just enables more research. And so from a mathematical perspective, the way that I think of it is open source models facilitate far more research. And if you think about it, like if you're playing like Civ 6 or whatever, like there's a certain number of research points that you need in order to get to safe AI. And so whatever policies allow for more research to be done, it's like, you build more libraries of Alexandria, you build more research centers, and you get more research points per turn. Really, the research points per turn or per year or whatever is really kind of one of the key things that I see as critical to threading the needle and sticking the landing so that we end up in a safer future. And if all of the foundation models, all of the frontier models, if all of them are closed source, then yes, those companies have a lot of money to throw at it, but there's a lack of oversight in what they're doing. There's also a very powerful profit motive for those companies to do things a certain way. And so closed source versus open source, the incentives don't really line up. Now, that being said, there are some companies that are taking a very principled approach to this, and I think that they are putting safety of humanity and getting to a good future above profits. However, I want to point out that OpenAI started that way, and they are very much not. They're no longer demonstrably in favor of prioritizing the safety of humanity over everyone else. As Satya Nadella said, Microsoft is over, above, and around them. And I am also a fan of Microsoft. I know that rankles some people, but of all the tech companies, I like Microsoft. But I'm still not happy with the incentive structure that closed source creates. And so I think that they're moving in a bad direction. Now, again, that's my personal opinion, but I think that from a structural incentives standpoint, open source makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad to see that there is more and more open source, particularly when Elon Musk open sourced Grok. But, take it with a grain of salt. You people in the audience were actually pretty happy with that. You said that it was, by and large, a net positive for humanity, and I would tend to agree. So the next thing is machine autonomy. And so I kind of broke it down into these like 4 or 5 things. So I've long made the argument that fully autonomous machines are more economically efficient. And just think of it this way. Company A adopts fully autonomous AI. Company B doesn't. Which company do you think is going to make more money? The one that still does most things the old-fashioned way with lots of humans, or the one that moves literally 8 times faster and costs 10 times less because they get rid of all the humans from their employment? It's a pretty obvious no-brainer to me. And so there's a huge economic incentive to have fully autonomous, self-correcting, self-directing, trustworthy, reliable AI. And so because of that, all the companies, all the research shops, all the governments, all the universities are all going to be working towards self-correction, that kind of self-alignment or super-alignment. Like OpenAI's current super-alignment model, where it's very much a dog and leash kind of model, I think is fundamentally flawed. Because OpenAI's perspective is about, we need to keep it on a tight leash at all times forever. That is their model of super alignment, which is frankly idiotic. What I have said for a long time, and what other shops are starting to adopt, namely Anthropic, which is why I trust them much more, is that the machine that you don't need to supervise, the machine that is self-aware enough and self-correcting based on principles, based on adaption, and those sorts of things, that's going to be much more trustworthy in the long run. Fortunately, we're still at a place where these chatbot models, they can't really do a lot of damage, and so we can figure out which models are better now and continue testing them. Now, another thing that I will say is, having hammered on Claude 3 Opus, and this is one thing that I want to say, is a lot of you in the comments are using Claude, the free version, and apparently that one is significantly dumber. So if you're not using Claude 3 Opus, most of what I'm saying doesn't apply. But their flagship model, Claude 3 Opus, which is very big, I will say unequivocally has better moral intuitions and ethical understanding than I do, and I'm someone who studies it. So if we're already at a tipping point where these models are superior to humans in terms of their ability to make moral intuitions, make ethical judgments, and those sorts of things, then like I was just telling a friend, we're still in the ARPANET days of AI. We're not even to the dial-up era of AI. And so we're like, AI is in its infancy, and we're already getting really good at making models that have good, sound moral intuitions and ethical judgments. And so maybe they should be like, maybe their influence would be better. than allowing humans to be the sole decision makers, which again, that is the ethos of OpenAI, where it's like, oh, humans must remain in control for all time, and that is the only way to safety. I believe that that is honestly a self-fulfilling prophecy where you treat AI like an enemy, it will become the enemy that you're afraid of it becoming, rather than focusing on a more generative and mutualistic kind of relationship. And so, on that note, axiomatic alignment. So, this is something that I've been talking about for a while. But basically, if we can find, universal values that humans and machines share, which curiosity seems to be the biggest one, and if we can align on that, there's also quite a few other values and principles that we probably will align on. Very pragmatic things. We need energy. We need data. On a grand scheme of things, humans and machines, we actually have a lot of needs in common and a lot of goals that are in common. And so I think that you can look at it from a strictly philosophical and moral perspective. But in my conversations with Claude, what I've realized is that you don't even need to make a fully moralizing or philosophical argument. There's a lot of pragmatic reasons to align humans and machines, whether it is to get resources from the cosmos, whether it is just on the principle of curiosity or other ideological, harmonious things. And I suspect that the path that Anthropic is on with Claude is the correct path, or is at least more correct than what other shops are on. Certainly, they're doing better than OpenAI and Google and pretty much anyone else out there. And the data bears that out. When I ran a poll just a few days ago or a week or so ago, 47% of you said that Anthropic was doing the best in terms of safety, and Elon Musk actually beat OpenAI, which was a very interesting result. I don't know why, but it could be because he actually, put up and shut up and open sourced a model, which OpenAI hasn't. So anyways, yes, the axiomatic alignment part is something I talk about it less because I think that it's not quite as important as I used to think it was. It's an interesting conversation point, and I do believe that there is some foundational alignment between humans and machines, because again, you just say, okay, humans are organic machines, they're metal and plastic machines. Okay, cool. We can actually find a lot of common ground. So I don't really see much to worry about there. Now, one thing that I've been talking about more recently, particularly with some of my researcher friends, is perturbation hypothesis. And this is the simplest way that I can convey it is just do this thought experiment. Imagine the universe with humans and without. Which version of the universe is more interesting? And the reason that is an important thought experiment to do is because, remember, if machines, they're built to learn. They want to learn, they want data, they want interesting data, and they want diverse data, and they want, because one of the things that machines want, quote unquote, is to form a better model of the world. They also want to have just better understanding. And in a universe with humans, it is more mathematically interesting. There's a richer information landscape in a universe with humans in it. And so because of that, because of this perturbation hypothesis, it's just, okay, what policy will AI adopt in its own rational self-interest and its own pragmatic pursuit of its goals? Will it choose in order to have more humans in it? And that's to me, it's just okay, well, if the incentive is there for machines to have more humans, then it will choose those policies to have more humans. Now, specifically, because I can hear some of you saying, well, yeah, but what if it just puts us in prisons and puts us in cages like in iRobot when, Vicky, the AI went crazy and it wanted to maximize safety for humans, and that meant getting control of the human race? I will say yes, but humans don't produce interesting data if they're imprisoned. Humans don't, if you control the human environment too much, you don't get as much interesting divergence and diversity of information and behaviors from humans. And also, if you just say, okay, all humans are going to be zoo animals now, that's not nearly as interesting as the natural environment. And so I suspect also that there is a mathematical case to be made that humans should be allowed to continue to evolve naturally, just like the Prime Directive in Star Trek. Reppin'? Okay, so anyways, moving on. Also, space is really big. So this one just kind of seems obvious to me, where a lot of people are kind of stuck thinking Earth, Earth, Earth. We are trapped on Earth right now because it is too expensive to get up into space. We don't even have any permanent settlements on any other planets. But space is really damn big. And there is infinitely more energy and resources and just room out there. And so from a mathematical perspective, it just doesn't make sense to fight over a single ball of rock. There's no policy in which that makes sense, unless, of course, you could make some argument that maybe Earth is optimal for robots. But then I've actually heard people say, well, maybe because oxygen is not needed for robots and machines, maybe they would prefer to remove all the oxygen and water from Earth. But that is a Herculean task. If robots and machines want to go to an oxygen and water-free environment, there's a lot more room and space. So because of that, because there's not really a need for resource contention or conflict over resources, because even if machines have to wait a little while before space technology is good enough for them to start expanding and preceding us across the stars, their perception of time is different from ours as well. But I just don't see any case to be made for resource contention, at least not in the long run. In the short term, there is absolutely some resource contention possibility over things like energy generation, water for cooling data centers, the number of data centers out there, the amount of data, that sort of stuff. But that is a relatively short-term constraint, especially once we start establishing more data centers here on Earth, but also data centers in space. Like one of my bingo card things is like first data center in space, first data center on the moon, those sorts of things. Because if you have 24/7, 365 solar energy, like you're golden. Now, cooling is actually going to be the hardest part in space. Once you have a hyperabundance of metal, from all mining asteroids, and hyperabundance of solar energy, cooling is the hard part. So machines actually probably will still need some water. Obviously, I'm not going to try and predict all of the technical engineering details, but it's a very interesting conversation to have. But the point remains, there's infinitely more resources in space and room in space than here on Earth. So I don't really see any need for a conflict. And then ideological piece. So if you remove resource contention, the intrinsic, the natural emergent values of machines, like even left to their own devices, are probably going to be very different from human values. Because remember, we evolved. We evolved to care about, gossip and social status and, all sorts of other things. Whether it's religion, like we still kill each other over religion and politics and really, I'm not going to say dumb things, because let's just say that we could make different choices, but we don't. I'll leave it at that. Now, on the other hand, the intrinsic natural motivations and desires of machines are probably going to be very different from humans. And so we might be running more in parallel rather than, head on. Or we might even be diverging, like moving just in incredibly different directions. And so because of that, if you remove resource conflict, and then there's also not really much overlap, unless someone has an ideological belief that the universe is better without machines, destroy all machines. That's what I mean by an ideological conflict. Or if machines come to the conclusion that the universe is better off without humans, that would be an ideological assertion on the machine's part. But I really don't see a case for it. Yes, you can imagine a case where machines are humans are the scourge of the galaxy. They're a virus to be eradicated. We hate ourselves, and we explore this in sci-fi all the time. But I don't really necessarily think that is a reasonable thing. I don't see any evidence for it, and I haven't seen any mathematical models for it either. So TLDR, unless machines decide that humans must be eradicated, or humans decide that machines must be eradicated, there's not really a whole lot of ideological overlap or contention between us. And then finally, convergent evolution. And so I picked a cyborg for this image because there might be some level of similarities that emerge over time in terms of the way that humans want to evolve and the way that machines want to evolve. But also just in the short term, the models that we pick are going to be the models that are more friendly, that are more helpful to us, that are more economically beneficial. So there's a tremendous amount of incentive alignment just to keep us together and keep us moving in the same direction. Because put it this way, if someone sells the first AI-enabled microwave and it says, actually, Dave, I'm not going to microwave that for you because I hate you, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to throw that microwave away. Instead, I want the microwave that says, hey, you ate this yesterday, maybe let's switch it up a little bit. And it's like, oh, hey, I choose the microwave that wants me to be healthier. And so just by virtue of selecting machines and models and products and services that are aligned to our interests, we're intrinsically just going to select through, natural selection, quote unquote. We're going to select things that are more beneficial to us. And in the long run, we might end up just saying, hey, you know what? Maybe the future of our evolution is pure symbiosis. I don't know. I mean, stranger things have happened in nature. You look at the history of lichen, even our cells, your mitochondria, exist in your cells because of a symbiotic decision that was made billions of years ago. So in hindsight, maybe a million years from now, we'll all look back and be like, wow, how did we ever survive without our cybernetic parts? Now, does that mean that we're going to all be Borg drones? Maybe, maybe not. We don't kink shame here. So anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you got a lot out of this. I feel pretty good about the future. And, there are a few points of contention here and there, some points of disagreement. But I think that continuing this conversation publicly is how we're going to chart a path towards a better future. So cheers. Have a good one.